The guys running after me were threatening to slit my throat and chanting for the genocide of Jews in the Middle East, the ethnic cleansing. Any Muslim can be turned into a Bondi killer by the process of an imam or a scholar online taking this to those texts and convincing them that on the basis of these foundational texts, this is how they should live.
Well, g'day and welcome. My feature interview is with Mark Leach, the Anglican minister who was chased through the streets of Sydney by Muslims threatening to slit his throat. He's made a submission to the Royal Commission on Antisemitism and Social Cohesion, recommending that violent Islamic texts and preaching from them should be banned. That's coming up, so don't go anywhere. But first, last week was our biggest show yet, with almost 5,000 views on YouTube alone. The reels and shorts were viewed by hundreds of thousands of people. I'm really humbled by the response. That's why I want to encourage you to like and subscribe and to share this content. People need to know what's really going on in Australia's culture wars. So please be a force multiplier. Like, subscribe and share. Thank you.
I've talked here today. Use my hands. Look, I've answered this question many times. The fact is that the Japanese Prime Minister and I have a very good relationship. The Japanese ambassadors made very clear statements, indeed, about how warm our dinner was, and it was indeed. It was fantastic.
Go and ask 1,000 workers what they care about today. Honestly, this is the biggest announcement for this region in a generation. Exactly. Can we just talk about it for 5 minutes?
I use my hands. Seriously? As if him using his hands at this press conference was the same as the lewd gesture he made on the now infamous Bush Deep podcast. Anthony Albanese has now had more than a month to apologise for his smutty melons remark and hand movements about the Japanese Prime Minister Sanae Takahashi, and he still won't say sorry. Family First called for an apology way back on July 8 because this is about basic respect for women and the dignity of the office of the Prime Minister. Japan is one of Australia's most important friends and allies. Its Prime Minister should not be subjected to this sort of juvenile behaviour from Australia's leader. And where are the feminists in Anthony Albanese's cabinet? They're defending the indefensible. They are hypocrites. Mr Albanese continues to insist there was nothing sexual about his remarks or gestures. No one in any Australian pub believes that. But Albanese won't always have New South Wales Premier Chris Minns there to save him, as you saw in that video. This really isn't complicated. Prime Minister, apologise to Sanae Takahashi. And if you cannot bring yourself to apologise for conduct that has brought the office of Prime Minister into disrepute, then you should resign. This week, taxpayers are being slugged $2.5 billion to bail out an industry crippled by the government's own net zero policies. Tomago aluminium smelters' electricity costs are set to double as reliable coal-fired power is shut down to make way for weather-dependent wind and solar, somehow to try and save the planet. So what's the government solution? Not cheaper, reliable electricity, but it's another taxpayer bailout with borrowed money. We're only in $1 trillion worth of debt, folks. Families pay once through soaring power bills, then again through their taxes to rescue industries that the government's policies are making unviable. It's just ridiculous. And meanwhile, global emissions, well, they just keep rising. Net zero is breaking Australian industry. It is not saving the planet, but taxpayers are being forced to pay for the wreckage. When will this madness stop? Well, I'm deeply concerned about the direction of Australia. I know you are too. The centre-right of Australian politics is fragmented with One Nation surge since Bondi, and the Liberals and the Nationals continuing to languish. We're in uncharted waters as voters tell pollsters they are abandoning the major parties in droves. It looks like the division on the centre-right could simply hand Labor and the Greens another term of government at the next federal election. That, of course, would be disastrous. A big part of the problem is the civil war within the coalition between so-called moderates like Andrew Bragg and conservatives like Angus Taylor and Matt Canavan. Now, Senator Bragg went to the National Press Club this week and gave a speech where he said conservative ideas would take Australia backwards. Well, where have so-called progressive ideas taken Australia, Senator Bragg? And Bragg also differed from his leader, Angus Taylor, on immigration policy, the biggest issue that's driving people away from the major parties. Now, to Taylor's credit, he pulled Bragg into line publicly. He had to because voters are over the left wing of the Liberal Party calling the shots. This was a rare rebuke, as for years the left of the Liberals have gotten away with freelancing in ways that Conservative Liberals never would get away with. The left of the Liberal Party pushed for same-sex marriage, for example, when it was Liberal policy to preserve marriage between a man and a woman. They got away with undermining key social policy, and the likes of Tim Wilson were rewarded for their bad behaviour. Liberal Conservatives, on the other hand, are never given latitude. Just look at how the Victorian Liberals treated Moira Deeming. So there's some encouraging signs from Angus Taylor this week, but a long way to go. Meanwhile, One Nation MP and former National Barnaby Joyce said One Nation was now one of the gayest parties in Australian politics. Now, this was a reference to Pauline Hanson's longtime Chief of Staff and now Federal Director, James Ashby. One Nation also elected a gay man to the South Australian Parliament who supports same-sex marriage. Now, since the One Nation surge, Family First has been soul-searching about our place in Australian politics. Do we keep going or do we fold our tent? While One Nation is aligned on many of our values and is using the megaphone it has to disrupt the status quo in ways which we welcome and which are needed, One Nation falls short on some of the most important virtues needed for family flourishing. For instance, marriage between one man and one woman must be restored for the sake of children, for their rights, and also for the flourishing of the wider society. A party that boasts of being one of the gayest won't achieve that. And while One Nation has some brilliant pro-life people, Barnaby is one of them, as is Senator Malcolm Roberts from Queensland, the party itself is far from pro-life. Pauline Hanson herself opposes late-term abortion, and that is good. But 90% of Australia's 100,000 abortions per year are not late-term. Therefore, Pauline Hanson supports 90% of Australia's abortions. Australia is drifting without clear moral and political leadership. For these reasons, Family First has a vital role to play, and we're going to remain in the fight.
The AFL has handed down its findings, allowing a transgender football player to continue playing women's community sport after safety concerns were raised. Westminster's Freya Golding says she's no different from the other players on her team and doesn't pose a risk.
We, to this day, maintain that it is a safety risk.
The AFL's Gender Diversity Policy Committee handing down its verdict after formal complaints were lodged by 3 Adelaide Footy League clubs into whether transgender Westminster Old Scholars player Freya Golding should continue to play.
Hi, my name is Freya and I'm a transgender woman and I play football.
Well, here we go again. Girls and women are being told that fairness in their own sport comes second to gender politics. The Australian Football League's Gender Diversity Policy Committee, yep, they've got such a committee, has cleared a biological man, Freya Golding, a transgender player who previously competed in male football, to continue playing in the Adelaide Footy League women's competition. This is despite 3 clubs raising formal duty of care concerns about player safety. Now, Golding is reported to be more than 6 feet tall and over 90 kilograms. Yet the AFL committee determined there was no unacceptable safety risk. What sort of world do they live in? This is grossly unfair to girls and women. Women's sport exists for a reason. Biological sex matters when strength, speed, size and physical contact matter. We're just stating the obvious here. And where the heck are our politicians? Well, they lack the courage to stand up to the LGBTQA plus political activism. And they lack the courage to simply say, women's sport is for women. How hard is it? By all means, respect every person, treat everyone with dignity, but fairness matters too. Girls should not have to sacrifice their safety, their opportunities, or sporting competitions because politicians and sporting administrators are frightened of the rainbow backlash. Well, Alex Greenwich has just been in Amsterdam networking with the global pride movement, and New South Wales parents should pay close attention. The prominent gay activist member of the New South Wales Parliament draws from an international political movement that's pushing gender-fluid ideology, redefining marriage and family, and increasingly promoting surrogacy that puts adult desires ahead of the rights of children and respect for women. This is where the inspiration for much of his anti-family and anti-freedom of speech policies come. Now, I'm involved in international networks as well, including the Alliance for Responsible Citizenship, but the purpose is very different. My networks are about rebuilding Western civilization, strengthening families, and defending freedom. That's the choice. Greenwich is about using his seat in the Parliament to push harmful ideology onto your children. He's just learnt some new things while in Amsterdam. Did you think this sort of political grooming couldn't happen in Australia? Think again. The Daily Telegraph has revealed that university-age activists have been handing out a booklet called the High School Anti-Capitalist Toolkit to Year 10 students outside Sydney schools. This isn't just encouraging kids to protest, it tells them how to skip class, recruit their classmates into socialist cells, and build an anti-Pauline Hanson activist network. It even instructs them to stay in school uniform so the media can identify them as school students. Where is the New South Wales Education Minister, Prue Carr? Why has she been silent while adults target children on their way to school with political revolutionary material? And will students who wag school for this strike face the same consequences as any other truant? Schools are supposed to teach reading, writing, and maths, not become recruiting grounds for far-left political movements. Children who can't even vote should not be manipulated into becoming human placards for adult activists. Family First is calling on the New South Wales Government to explain how this was allowed to happen in the first place. They need to investigate who is behind it, ensure school strikes are treated as unauthorised absences, and get New South Wales schools back to their core job, education, not indoctrination. If you think politics should stay out of schools, hit like, subscribe, and share this video. Parents deserve answers. Well, what you just witnessed there was the Massachusetts Governor, Maura Healey, signing into law a bill legitimising the killing of unborn babies all the way to birth. The people clapping were Democrat lawmakers. This is really sick, folks. Applause for killing babies instead of supporting their mothers who feel they have no other choice is just despicable. What most people don't know is that Massachusetts is simply catching up to Australia. That's right, every Australian state and territory already allows abortion to birth, and most Liberal and Labor and Nationals MPs voted for it. In fact, the Liberals were in government in New South Wales and in South Australia when it was made legal in 2019 and 2021, respectively. Here's an ultrasound image of what happens to a baby when he or she is being aborted. What you are seeing is not a clump of cells, which is what politicians used to tell us to justify abortion. This is a human baby fighting for his or her life from an abortionist's implements. While ever we fail to support mothers and instead kill their babies, we have no claim to call ourselves a civil society. Well, newly released text messages show that US COVID health czar Dr. Anthony Fauci privately warned of a miscarriage risk from COVID vaccines while publicly saying there were no red flags for pregnant women. These revelations further shatter trust in governments and health bureaucrats that demanded unquestioning obedience during the pandemic. Here in Australia, the politicians who locked us down, pushed vaccine mandates and cost people their jobs remain silent. It's time for a full reckoning over the mistakes and the injustices of the COVID era. That's why Family First has long called for a royal commission. The accusation that Israel is committing genocide in Gaza has become one of the most potent claims of the anti-Israel movement. But does it withstand scrutiny? Professor Michael Mandelbaum of Johns Hopkins University gives one of the clearest and most concise rebuttals that I've heard.
That is, it is now said in democratic circles that Israel's committed genocide in Gaza. That is simply false. Genocide is the effort to wipe out an entire people. The Israelis have never even thought of trying to wipe out all Palestinians. And in fact, the evidence for that is there are 2 million Arab citizens of Israel, and they have full civic rights. They can vote, they serve as judges, they're doctors, the only place in the Middle East where Arabs can vote. And the 2 million Arab citizens of Israel are as much Palestinians as people who live in Gaza and the West Bank. So the idea that Israel is committing genocide is, not to put too fine a point on it, a lie.
Well, I've been deeply concerned with the rise of anti-Semitism in Australia since the October 7 atrocities committed by Muslim Gazans. There are dark signs that the 1930s are repeating themselves. To try and make sense of it, I spoke this week to Reverend Mark Leach of Allies for a Stronger Australia. Well, it's great to have Reverend Mark Leach with me on the show. Mark, thanks so much for giving of your time today. You're with Allies for Australia, formerly Never Again Is Now, and you're really trying to highlight this terrible issue of anti-Semitism that has reared its ugly head in our nation.
Yeah, Lyle, thank you so much for having me on. Absolutely. We at Allies for a Strong Australia believe that anti-Semitism is a symptom of this deeper underlying cultural, moral and political problem that we have in Australia of division, of polarization and of increasing tribalism. And if we want to stand as a strong Australia, as Jesus said, a house divided against itself can't stand. So we have to address anti-Semitism as a way of addressing the underlying challenges we face.
Mark, you've put in a very powerful submission to the Royal Commission on Anti-Semitism, and you've been really highlighting this issue since October 7, 2023, and probably beforehand, but that's the seminal event that has probably woken a lot of us up. I'm going to read out one of your, or probably your key recommendation to the Commission, and we won't speak to it now, but we'll build our way to it. But this is a bit of a teaser for our audience. You recommend to the Commission that they make the teaching and practice of a core part of Islam illegal in Australia. So hold that thought. Let's rewind the clock back to just after October 7, 2023. There was that demonstration of Muslims on the forecourt of the Opera House. I think that was October 9. That day, just prior to that incident, you were involved in something before that at St Andrew's Cathedral. Tell us what happened that night.
Well, on October, the attacks in Israel happened on October the 7th. Less than 48 hours, 8 hours afterwards, the anti-Israel, pro-Palestinian groups decided to hold a rally to protest the New South Wales government lighting up the sails of the Opera House in blue and white in an act of solidarity with Israel. And I decided to go down and do a counter protest. I thought this was just an appallingly bad decision to allow this rally to go ahead and even to call for it. And so I went down, and these rallies start in Sydney in the square between the town hall and Sydney, St Andrew's Cathedral, the Anglican Cathedral, my cathedral as an Anglican pastor. So I phoned the police and I said, well, asked them what was happening. I said, look, I plan to come down to the rally. And they said, well, Mr. Leach, today we are advising the Jews to stay out of the city. And if you come into the city, we can't guarantee your safety. And finally, the station commander said, and Mr. Leach, if you come in and try and do anything, we will arrest you. So I thought that was advice worth ignoring. So I did. And I took a big Israeli flag with me, wrapped up in my squash bag, put on a clerical shirt, walked down to the cathedral and stood amongst the crowd as they got going, chanting for the genocide of Jews in the Middle East, the ethnic cleansing of Israel. And I waved the flag of Israel as an act of solidarity with Jewish Australians, with Israel. But I waved the flag to take a stand for the soul of Australia and say this is not who we are, that we keep the Jews out of the city and we give the centre over to hatred. And they then chased me out of the square, threatening to slit my throat. And the rest, as they say, is history.
I remember watching the news that night, and I didn't know who you were, but I think the news reported there was this Jewish man being chased, waving an Israeli flag through the streets of Sydney. It was almost comical, apart from the fact that it was so serious.
Yeah, it was very serious. I mean, they were very angry. The guys running after me were threatening to slit my throat. That's actually a criminal offence, according to the Shadow Attorney General of the state, even though the police declined to prosecute the offenders. They thought it didn't amount to a prosecutable offence. So the level of hatred was just so visceral in the air that night. It was deeply, deeply concerning, and continues to be deeply concerning.
Now, as I say, I hadn't heard of you prior to that night, but you have Jewish in your family. Tell us about that.
Yeah, so my mum was a German Jew who fled with her parents from Frankfurt in Germany in July 1938. So they were able to get an exit visa by saying they were just going on holidays to Holland, and then they got on a boat and ended up as refugees in Swaziland, a little British protectorate in southern Africa. So yeah, my mum's Jewish. My father was a white South African Roman Catholic. So I say I was, with a Jewish mum and a Catholic dad, I had double the guilt. And now I say I identify as 100% Jewish and 100% Christian and just bad at maths.
Very good. So with that family history and your mum being a Holocaust survivor, you knew the significance of what had happened on October 7 with Hamas's attack. And I presume that's what then caused you to want to take the action you did by making your own one-man counter-protest as Muslims gathered outside St Andrew's Cathedral with the intent to march down on the Opera House.
Yeah, so it wasn't just about Israel, though it was. I mean, Israel's been fighting an existential battle since 1948, when the surrounding Arab nations all decided that they could not tolerate the existence of a Jewish state in the Middle East. This was really more about Australia, and it became clear to me that the risk we ran in Australia was that we would repeat the mistakes of the average German citizen and German Christian in the 1930s, which is, maybe 20% of German Christians supported Hitler, maybe 20% opposed Hitler. The problem was the middle 60% who didn't want to get involved, didn't want to be political. Your listeners may not know this, but the most common day in Germany in the late 30s and 40s to round up Jews was a Sunday, and a Sunday morning, while all the good Christians were in church, singing their hymns, saying their prayers, listening to their fine sermons. They would do that as a way of not getting involved while their neighbours were taken off to death camps. And while in Australia we're a long way off having death camps for Jews, the reality of this ancient visceral hatred of the Jews resurfacing is there. It's amongst us. It's here. We've seen it tragically unfold. And it became very clear to me in the days and weeks after October the 7th and the 9th that there was an urgent need to wake up, particularly Christians in Australia, to the reality of this hatred, and as an act of love to stand with our Jewish Australian fellow citizens.
As a result of that, after those terrible events on the steps of the Opera House, after you were chased through the streets with Australian Muslims threatening to slit your throat, you organised a number of big rallies right around the country under the Never Again Is Now banner. They were very successful, weren't they?
Yeah, so we decided that a few amazing connections were made between myself and some folk in the Jewish community, and a small group of us said we need to do something. And so we thought, well, why don't we organize a rally or an event organized by Christians, because the Jewish community were being warned still to stay out of the city, to not get involved. So we thought, well, we'll organise the event, we'll put it on. So we started off with a big event in the Domain here in Sydney, and we had 10,000 people come out, including Scott Morrison and John Anderson. And all the great ones were there. Thanks, Lyle. Yeah.
Oh, it was a terrific event.
It was so good. And then we did those in Melbourne and in all the capital cities around the country. And they were very powerful. I mean, life-changing for many in the Jewish community. Like after the first one here in Sydney, I had one of the Jewish community leaders call me on the Sunday night, and he said, Mark, I want to tell you what this was like for me. He said, it was like today you stood up in front of 10,000 people, you stretched out your arms and you gave us all a hug. And for the first time in months, if not years, we felt loved in Sydney. And I thought that's really what it was all about. And it's continued to grow and develop from there.
was really shocked after October 7 to see this ancient hatred of anti-Semitism that you described a moment ago rearing its head again. I thought we were done with that after World War II and the Holocaust. I mean, Hollywood, I've grown up watching Hollywood movies. Schindler's List, one of the most powerful movies I've ever seen. But, anti-Nazi sentiment and sympathy for what happened to the Jews in the Holocaust has been a feature of many, many great films over many years, up until very recent times. So I just thought that demon had been exorcised from the West, but clearly not.
Yeah, I think two things. You very rightly said you thought the demon had been exorcised from the West. And in one sense, for a generation, it has been. And it's been 80 years of unparalleled safety and prosperity for the Jewish community living in countries like Australia. It's been phenomenal. But in the Middle East, that demon has never been exorcised. In fact, nearly 1 million Jews have been expelled in the face of pogroms and massacres from the Middle East since 1948. Your listeners may not know, but there was a plan developed by the Grand Mufti of Jerusalem, who was a key ally of Hitler's, to and with the Egyptian authorities to complete the genocide of Jews in the Middle East. Once the plan that Hitler and the Arab leadership developed, some of the Arab leadership, was once Jews had been eradicated from Europe, then the Nazis would assist the Arabs in developing a final solution in the Middle East. Now, thank God that didn't happen, but what happened after 1948 was nearly 1 million Jews were expelled. So Islamic anti-Semitism did not even pause to draw breath after the Holocaust. In fact, has been growing in its virulence ever since 1948. And tragically, what's happened is that Islamic anti-Semitism in the West has given permission for the old Western Christian anti-Semitism to bubble up again. So yes, you're exactly right. We're seeing the specter of right-wing so-called Christian anti-Semitism emerging in countries like Australia. And even more bizarrely, we're seeing the anti-Semitism of the radical left joining together with explicitly Islamic anti-Semitism here in Australia. So yeah, it's very concerning. It's a complete shock to the Jewish community and to people like yourself and myself who thought we'd learned the lessons of history.
I thought we were through this. I guess I could understand the anti-Semitism still being latent in those Muslim countries. I guess for many of us, out of sight, out of mind. But the merging of the anti-Semitism with the political left, in one sense, doesn't surprise me too much, because to me that seems part of their project is to try and undermine Western civilization. So this is just a marriage of convenience, it would seem. So I can probably understand the radical left jumping on this, the Green Left Alliance that we hear about. But what has shocked me is right-wing, even notionally Christian people, Tucker Carlson in America being the most notable. I don't understand that phenomenon at all. Can you help us understand why people from the conservative, even Christian right would be going down this rabbit hole? Or dark hole, I should say.
Yeah, it's not a rabbit hole. It's a hole straight to the pit of hell, in my view. Look, Christian anti-Semitism has been a feature of a bug of Christianity for 1,800 years. So I say to everyone, I've been doing these lectures all around the country on Christian and Islamic anti-Semitism. And the truth of the matter is hatred of Jews is a bug, not a feature of Christianity, and that's a very important distinction to make. If you read the foundational documents of Christianity, you look at the life of Jesus, you look at the Christian scriptures, the New Testament, you can't justify hatred of Jews from there, and you can't call yourself an authentic follower of Jesus and hate Jewish people. But it's a persistent bug, and it's just there. And I think in the end, it's a spiritual issue. I think there's a deep demonic, anti-God drive to attack Jewish people. They're the most persecuted minority for 3,000 years. And yeah, it's re-emerging here. You see it, and we're seeing it on the right of politics here in Australia. And it's incredibly concerning. I see it amongst influencers here buying the whole anti-Zionist, and the Jews control the world, conspiracy theories, everyone, the Jews that are blamed for everything that's gone wrong with themselves and their lives. And it just, in the end, it's just an ancient evil that we have to address with the truth of the gospel and, and some good policing.
Yeah, look, it's some of these conspiracy theories, like, as you say, the Jews control the world, the finances, the banking system. These are the enmities that arose in the 1930s. It's like history is repeating itself. It's ridiculous. Mark, let's go to your submission to the Royal Commission on... it's not even... What's the correct title? It's into social cohesion.
The Royal Commission on Antisemitism and Social Cohesion.
Okay, anti-Semitism and social cohesion. So it's not into... It's not into the Bondi massacre, although that was the thing that provoked it, rightly. But they're not allowed to, I guess, investigate the massacre itself. It's got to be on these broader social issues.
No, the massacre, I think, has been investigated, so that's part of the remit for sure. But it's the goal is to investigate and then come up with recommendations to address the whole environment that allowed the massacre to happen. And then address, under the banner of social cohesion, how do we, how do we build a cohesive society when the risk is that we are actually fragmenting and being torn apart, and anti-Semitism is a sign of that. A slightly cynical take would be that social cohesion was a sop to deflect from just a focus on Jewish people, and in particular a sop to the sort of, they couldn't call it Islamophobia, they couldn't have that, and thank goodness the government resisted the call to make it an inquiry into anti-Semitism and Islamophobia, but it sort of was heading in that direction with the social cohesion label.
That's right, and that's probably what I'm getting a little confused with, although I did hear the Commissioner, Virginia Bell, speaking... well, there was some recorded excerpts from things she'd said at the Commission about not litigating the Bondi massacre. So I guess that's probably what I was referring to, and not wanting to lead witnesses, etc.
Correct. No, correct. That's right. So technically, this is not about a judgment of who was guilty or not, because that will be decided by the courts.
Yeah,
correct.
Sure.
Yeah, 100%.
Okay, let's go to your submission then. You say some things about Islam. You say Islam as a religion and a political system doesn't share the fundamental assumptions of a Western society like Australia. What do you mean by that?
Well, when you read the foundational documents of Islam, so the Quran, which I'd refer your listeners, we're on our YouTube channel, very shortly we're going to put up a whole series of lectures from a brilliant scholar of Islam called the Reverend Dr. Mark Leach, so you can go there for some more details. But the foundational documents of Islam, the Quran, the Hadiths, and the Sirah, so the sayings and the biography of the Prophet Muhammad, when you look at how the basic assumptions and teachings in those documents about the nature of God, the nature of humanity, who we are, what's gone wrong, what is the solution, and then how should we organize our lives in the light of that solution, those answers to those fundamental questions are different to the answers we give in our Judeo-Christian Western tradition, drawing as we do on the Old and New Testaments, on Greek philosophy and on Roman theory, and then on English political theory. So they're very different. And I'll give you an example. In the heart of Islam, the vision of Islam is that to be truly human, the best way to be a human is to submit perfectly to the will of Allah. Life is about submission. That's what Islam means. And the way we know what submission looks like is by modeling our lives on that of the Prophet Muhammad. He was the perfect human who most clearly revealed how we should submit to Allah. And so life is all about submission, and it's about submission in every little detail. So Islam is about jurisprudence, legislating every little facet of our lives, from the minutiae of how you wipe your bottom when you go to the bathroom, what foot goes first in the doorway when you go into the bathroom, through to how you organize your political system and your country. The Judeo-Christian tradition says, no, the heart of human existence is about flourishing in freedom as people made all equal in the image of the one God. And Christianity is about using reason and conscience and our intellects to discover how we live in this world. God says, here are certain things you shouldn't do, 10 commandments. For the rest of it, find your freedom, go and flourish, use your brains, organize yourself together. So the vision of the Christian life is one of flourishing in love, in community. The vision under Islam is of human beings in complete submission to the life ultimately of the Prophet Muhammad, who died in 632 AD. So he was a 7th century Arab living in the Middle East as a warlord. So you end up with two very different visions of what life looks like and what the good life is. And those result in a whole series of values and behaviors that are incompatible with our Western liberal democracy.
There's a lot of those and probably too many to unpack now, but I think some of the obvious ones are Islam's attitude towards women. The testimony of a woman in a court, they have Sharia courts, is not worth that of a man. So Christianity would prescribe equality for men and women. Islam doesn't. So clearly that's problematic from a Western point of view.
Oh, absolutely. So the role of women in Islam is fundamentally different to that of the role of women in our Judeo-Christian tradition. As you've highlighted, the testimony of women is worth half that of men. Inheritance laws differ. Women, if a married woman belongs to her husband. Yep. Polygamy, you're allowed to beat your wife if she is stubbornly persistent in withholding sex, for example. So a woman has no right. So there's no such thing as marital rape in Islam. Yep. Child marriage, female genital mutilation, slavery. I've been very involved for many years with the modern-day slavery movement with organizations like International Justice Mission. Islam has never rejected theologically the holding of people as slaves, because that is what the Prophet Muhammad did. Another
Australian Muslims, though, are going to say we don't practice that in Australia. That's not part of modern Islam.
Well, they don't practice it in Australia because we have decided that many of these things are actually illegal in Australia. So we already legislate and say these things are illegal under Sharia. So Sharia is the term given to the law, the jurisprudence of Islam. Now, in Islamic theology, every Muslim should be committed to living under Sharia. Now, if you're in a minority in a country like the Muslim community in Australia, they will still, and their leaders will say this, they still are committed to Sharia, but just not yet. So you submit to the rule of the country in a minority when you're a minority, but when you gain the ability to bring about Sharia, then you should. Because within a Muslim framework, Sharia is the best way to organize your life. This is the perfect description of how humanity should live under Allah. So if we understand Islam on its own terms, then this makes perfect sense. Now, Muslims in Australia would say, well, we're not in an Islamic country, so we can't practice Sharia. The question is, but if we were, would you support it? And then many of them will say, they should all say yes. Now the truth of the matter is lots of Muslims don't know much about their religion. And lots of Muslims, like lots of Christians and Jews, do not follow their religion scrupulously. Like lots of Christians, lots of Protestants and Catholics and lots of Jews aren't scrupulous in obeying every little dictate of their religion. And so it is with Muslims. And let me say, there are many, many wonderful, lovely, kind, gentle, peace-loving Muslims in the world. That is not the question. The question is the vision of Sharia, of how we should live under Islam, and big sections of that are fundamentally incompatible with our democracy, including, and this is what concerns me in our current environment, how Muslims in the Quran and the Hadiths are taught to relate to Jewish people and to infidels more generally, but particularly the Jews. And that is the part that I addressed in my submission and is deeply, deeply troubling for the future of social cohesion in Australia.
A lot to unpack in what you just said, but in your submission, you do point out that Islam is very clear in that it does call for the subjugation, the conquering, and the killing of Jewish people. Now, again, Australian Muslims, I'm sure, would say that's not part of our religion, but you've asserted in your submission to the Commission that that is part of Islam. Help us to understand that.
Well, I don't have to do anything but point to the Bondi massacre on December the 15th. You go, well, there's your evidence. There are two people who are motivated by and informed by a vision of life lived under the Sharia, who believe that killing Jewish Australians was a religious duty. And
play devil's advocate there, Mark, because Australian Muslim leaders have come out and, they've condemned the Bondi massacre and they've said this is not part of Islam.
Sure. And of course they would say that because Muslims in the West are have assiduously tried to drive a wedge between the Sharia, the teachings of Islam, and how we in the West understand it, so that they can live at peace in Australia and in the Western world. And they are right. The vast majority of Muslims in Australia would reject what happened at Bondi. But you just have to look around the world and say, ever since, say, 9/11, in the last 25 years, there have been more than 50,000 jihadist terror attacks conducted by Muslims. So it's completely unremarkable when you read the foundational texts of the Islamic faith, that they are instructed, for example, the very well-known hadith and authoritative hadith from Sahih al-Bukhari, where it says at the end of time, all of creation itself will conspire to help the Muslims kill the Jews. So, the trees and the rocks will cry out, come, O Muslim, here is a Jew hiding behind me, come and kill them. So this is not radical teaching. This is foundational text. Now, the good thing is the majority of Muslims don't actually either know or follow those texts. But it's still statistically a significant problem that these texts, that there are people who do believe these texts. And any Muslim anywhere in the world can be turned into a Bondi killer by the process of an imam or a scholar online taking this to those texts and convincing them that on the basis of these foundational texts, this is how they should live. This is what they need to do. They need to conduct jihad against Israel, against anyone against whom a fatwa has been ordered, and they need to go to war. ISIS is a great example. So we have a challenge here, and what I said in my submission is we need to address the teachings in the Quran and the Hadiths and the Sirah that actually incite violence against Jews. And until we have that conversation, we have a problem. In the same way that we have banned polygamy and female genital mutilation in Australia, we need to address this element of Islam now. And until we do that, Jewish life in Australia won't be safe.
Said I was playing devil's advocate, and it's not because I doubt you. I don't at all.
No.
I feel very, very deeply concerned, and I haven't come at this from the background of knowledge that you have. But since October 7, it's been extraordinary to me to see so many supposedly moderate Muslim imams and sheikhs saying quite outrageous things. And you mentioned one of those, that quote from one of the Islamic texts, there's a Jew, behind a tree, come and kill him. And I believe Wissam Hadid said that. And he was taken to the tribunal, I think, for hate speech, and rightly he was found guilty of that, but completely unrepentant. But he was one of the ones who allegedly radicalised one of the Bondi shooters. I guess the other thing, Mark, that's alarmed me, apart from examples like Wissam Hadid, who's still on the streets today, is that I haven't seen any full-throated condemnation of what Hamas did on October 7. Maybe there's been some, but I would regularly check the Islamic Imams Council, the Islamic National Council website, and all I would see was criticism of Israel and no condemnation of Hamas. That really bothered me because I think it's pretty clear who the bad guys of October 7 are and who the good guys are, regardless of what one might think of Israel's battle tactics in the ensuing war.
Oh, well, that's because you're a white colonial settler who's on the side of American and Jewish imperialism, and you don't understand the real context of the colonial oppression of the plucky Palestinians by the evil Israelis. And you have not been well steeped in post-colonial literature to realize that any and all resistance is justified. So that's your problem. You see, if you really understood how evil Israel was, and the religious, and not just how evil, but it's the religious duty of every Muslim to free Israel, the land, from the occupation by the kuffar, by the Jews. It's an affront to Islam that a land that was for centuries ruled by Muslims should now be occupied not just by infidels, but by the Jews who have been tolerated in the Middle East for 1,400 years as dhimmis, as second-class citizens. But now that the Jews, these people whom in the foundational texts of Islam, Muslims are taught that Allah will turn them into apes and pigs, they're second-class human beings who are forever deceitful and weak, that these people should now have their own independent state in the Middle East, having taken it away from the Muslims. This is why they haven't condemned Hamas, because theologically they can't. Theologically they think what Hamas has done is actually justified resistance and religiously justified. So even though most of them would say their consciences would be violated by what happened, they'd be like, in their heart of hearts, they'd go, yeah, that was pretty evil and awful. But actually, Islam is not about your conscience. It's about, well, this is the doctrine, this is the theology of it, and so they have to support it. So,
and it really does need to be unpacked, because I think this is an existential issue, not just for the Jews. And I'm embarrassed as an Australian that the Jewish community here is under such pressure and being maligned so unfairly. But I just have a sense this is not going to stop with the Jews. You mentioned that the narrative here is oppressor, victim, colonial, settler. That's really what's at play, and that's why the left of our political spectrum have jumped on board with the Green Alliance. The green being the colour for the Palestinians. So this is not going to stop with the Jews, is it?
No, just look around. It's Christians who are being massacred by the colonial jihadists in North Africa and the Middle East. And it's not going to stop with us. And I'd make this point. Our answer to this, our Allies for a Strong Australia, says we can exist in a peaceful, collaborative way with the Muslim minority if we have a strong enough sense of who we are as Australians. And Muslims who move here have to actually assimilate and leave behind those parts of Islam that do not fit with us. And the example I use is Israel. So Israel has 20% of Israel's population is Muslim. But Israel's identity, when you go to Israel, the identity as a Jewish state and of who they are and what makes them who they are is so compelling and so strongly held by the vast majority of people that actually they can quite happily coexist with 20% a population, 20%, that's 20% Muslim, Arab. And that's excluding the disputed territories, Judea, Samaria, the West Bank. That's another complicated issue. But I think that's the example for us. If we are really deeply embedded and committed to our Western tradition, our Judeo-Christian values, this idea that we're a Western civilization and nothing and no one's going to change that, then any Muslim who comes in is welcome, but on our terms, then we can live together. The problem is we have so many on the left who are rejecting that vision of Australia and wanting to say, well, we've got to be ashamed of being a Western country. We've got to be ashamed of our Christian and Jewish heritage. We've got to pull all this down. That makes us incredibly vulnerable to tribalism and to creeping Islamization. So that's how we're trying to address it.
Yeah, the radical left are using radical Islam as a proxy for their project of bringing down Western civilization, including Australian. And
Correct.
that's very, very serious. And our young people are being indoctrinated into this at school and at university. You say in your submission that Muslims are bound to follow the example of the Prophet Muhammad, who in 627 AD slit the throats of somewhere between 600 and 900 Jews. And that would explain why, when you were being chased down the street as those Muslims were on their way to the Opera House, that they were making this sort of a motion. They knew their scriptures, didn't they?
They did, and those young men are. I don't even think they're radicalized. They just know their scriptures, and they know that this is how jihad is conducted. Throat slitting is a favorite form of killing infidels, and it's always interesting. You know, you compare the founder of Islam with the founder of Christianity. You know, how did the Prophet treat people? And how did Jesus treat people? So Muhammad, particularly in the second part of his life, in the Medina period, kill your enemies, kill the kuffar, kill the infidels, or have them submit. So you can either submit and live as a dhimmi, you can convert to Islam, or we'll go to war with you and we'll kill you. And how does Jesus treat his enemies? And how does Jesus instruct us to treat our enemies? He says, well, as a good Jewish rabbi, he says, love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you. So vastly different behavior of our respective founders. And I know which one I want us to choose as a country to model ourselves on.
Yeah, Jesus rode into Jerusalem on a donkey very humbly to a martyr's death. Muhammad rode into Medina slitting the throats of people. I guess which example would you like to follow? Mark, you've been very generous with your time. Just in finishing, we mentioned at the start, I guess, the seminal recommendation in your submission to Virginia Bell's inquiry, Royal Commission into Antisemitism and Social Cohesion. You say that we need to make the teaching and practice of a core part of Islam illegal in Australia, a core part of Islam. I'm not holding my breath that will be adopted by the Commission, but you're saying this is crucial to our future social cohesion as a nation.
Well, I would like to see that those texts in the Quran, the Hadiths, and the Sirah that incite violence against Jews, that those texts are treated as incitement to violence, and that they are therefore prohibited from being taught in Islamic schools and mosques. I just think that would be a sensible thing. If we would, that would be good. Now, that's going to be a very difficult conversation for us in Australia to have, but we need to have it for the sake of the Jewish community and ourselves, because it's, this is about the kind of country we want to be. So our strategy at Allies is, no matter what the Commission says, we are building a citizen movement of everyday Aussies who want to hold the centre against this creeping Islamization, against Sharia, and against the radical left, and against the emerging racist right. We're a centrist movement to electorate by electorate hold our politicians to account. So, Lyle, when maybe one day you're elected in the upcoming elections, we will be on your case to say to you, Lyle, this is the kind of country we want, and we want to support you when you preserve our civilization and our values, and we'll oppose you if you oppose them, and we'll say that to any politician of any party, because I really believe when I travel around the country all the time, Australians are fundamentally decent people. We don't want Jewish Australians to be persecuted, just like we don't want anyone to be hated in this country. So we have to fearlessly look at what are the sources of hatred and address those. And if there happen to be one religion's religious texts or foundational texts, well, the answer is understand them as incitement to violence and deal with them. And I would say that about every and any text or tradition.
I agree with you there. And straight away I can hear objectors saying, well, what about violent texts in the Bible? But and you're a greater theologian than I am, but I would say that the difference between the Quran and the Bible is the Bible's got a New Testament, and Jesus came and said, those ways of doing things are over. There's a new way of being Israel in him and in his kingdom, and of course it's turned the other cheek. It's a non-violent approach, whereas that wouldn't find it an expression similar in Islam.
Well, it's not just the Christian scriptures of the New Testament. Even the legislation in books of Leviticus and Deuteronomy back in the Torah, Jewish theologians and Christian theologians for 3,000 years have understood these were time-bound instructions to legislate how the Jewish people should organize their life 3,000 years ago. They are not ongoing, perpetual commands for us. So in
Judaism,
Islam, they are ongoing, perpetual commands.
Right. So in Judaism, they're not necessarily even ongoing perpetual commands.
No.
I didn't know that.
No, of course not. No, of course not. So I mean, there's and our moral and ethical thinking as Christians is really taken straight. I mean, Jesus didn't come to abolish the law, but to fulfill it. And he's never, like, his teaching on morality doesn't deviate from the Torah at all. So you'll never go to a synagogue and hear a rabbi calling for adulterers to be stoned to death. That doesn't happen, because in Judaism and in Christianity, we've worked out these were time-bound in a particular period in a theocracy under the rule of God. Living as we do now, the revelation has developed, and this is not how we're to live. In Islam, every one of the details of the life of the Prophet is still seen as an ongoing, perpetual command to every Muslim person everywhere in the world. That's
important, because that'll stop some of the trolls leaving silly comments underneath this podcast. That's a very helpful explanation. No,
it won't stop them, mate, because they'll still troll us and say, "What about this? What about that?" I'm sure that's okay.
Well, at least the information's here. That's very helpful. Mark, I know I've already sort of said thanks for your time, but there is one other thing I'd like to ask, because it's topical. There's a application before the Canterbury Bankstown City Council by the Lakemba Mosque, Australia's largest mosque, arguably our most iconic Muslim place of worship, to broadcast the Muslim call to prayer, the Adhan. As Family First, we've come out and opposed that because we don't think that's a religious freedom issue. We think this is about Islam, political Islam, and subjugation and trying to take territory. Your comments on that?
We would support the stance that you guys have taken. And in fact, I was just on a Zoom call with a ratepayer from Canterbury Bankstown who is very concerned about this, and we're concerned about it. And it is about domination. So the call to prayer, the answer to the call to prayer is come and pray with us, i.e. become Muslim, or live as a second-class citizen in the area where you hear the call to prayer. And if you don't want to live as a second-class citizen, then under Sharia, we're coming to go to war with you. That's actually the response that the call to prayer is designed to evoke within Islamic theology. So I don't think it's an issue of religious freedom at all. So I think you guys are
Mark,
right.
You may or may not have seen this, but I played this on my podcast last week. But two young YouTubers, Abe and Kyle from EvangelAUS, produced their own half-hour documentary on the call to prayer application for Lakemba, and they interviewed Gamal Kir, the spokesman for the Lebanese Muslim Association, inside Lakemba Mosque. He answered exactly what you just said was the Muslim response to the call to prayer, those three choices. He said it on camera, including the third one being war. We think he made a mistake, that he didn't mean to say that, but people can look that up on my podcast or on the EvangelAUS YouTube channel. It's there in black and white. It was only filmed a couple of months ago. So I think he made a mistake, but this is a modern, supposedly moderate Muslim saying this is what the call to prayer is all about.
Look, Islam, the Muslim leaders don't hide what they believe. We just don't like to believe that they believe that. We impose on we read unto Islam, we read it through the lens of our own Judeo-Christian worldview. They can't possibly believe that. They've obviously left that behind. But this is just mainstream, stock standard Islamic teaching. There's nothing unusual about what he said. We just need to grapple with it and encourage Muslims to reject those bits of Islam which do not fit with 21st century liberal democratic Australia.
Very good. Well, Mark, I'm very grateful for your time. We're looking forward to having you speak at the Family First National Conference on Saturday, August 22. People can come along there and hear more from you, but really appreciate your time and all the work that you're doing with Allies for a Strong Australia. Thanks so much.
It's a pleasure, Lyle. Thank you for having me.
Well, Mark will be speaking at the Family First National Conference next week, and the cutoff to purchase tickets is midnight tomorrow. That's midnight Saturday, August 15. Go to familyfirstparty.org.au/events to get your tickets before it's too late. Now, I'm continuing to tour with my new book, Turn the Tide. I'm going around New South Wales, and I'll be in southern Queensland for the last week of August. And for details of where I'll be, or to order a copy of the book for yourself, go to turnthetide.au. That's turnthetide.au. This book is all about encouraging the church to get involved in the battle to save Australia. It's that serious, folks. The hour is late. Well, thanks for your company again this week. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Until next week, keep speaking up.